What's up, tribe? How you guys doing? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and I hope you like this video. This is going to be your review for Black Cake Season 1, Episode 2. So, we start this episode off. We have Benny, we have Byron and Mr. Mitch in the living room listening to Eleanor telling her story. And then she has to take a pause because she gets to the point where she moved to London and she's talking about how homesick and everything she was and how this next chapter was really a hard chapter. And so she says, you know what, I need to take a pause. I need to take a little break. And Mr. Mitch stops the tape and he lets them know, listen, you know, your mom, this part really, you know, this was a very emotional part for your mom, and it took a toll on her, and it was really hard for her to get through. And so now Benny and Byron are looking at him like, how well did you know my mama? You know? And Benny is like, listen, I ain't even here for all of this. Like, this is ridiculous. Why do we have to go through all of this? Why she couldn't just tell us? Like, I was right here. He said, I don't know what she talking about. She talking crazy. Maybe it was the brain tumor. And Benny was like, but you were here. Like, you were here with her. Wouldn't you know if she was, like, losing her mind or if she was talking crazy? Like, I don't think that's what it is. And this is our story. This is our history. And Byron was like, I ain't even trying to hear all of this. And she said, well, I want to hear it. And remember, they have to be there together. So it's not like Mr. Mitch can play part of it for Benny. They have to be there together. That was part of her mother's stipulation. So, and Benny said, you know, it's really nice to hear that mom had flaws. Like, I spent my whole life trying to live up to the idea of this perfect woman that I thought she was. And it's nice to know that maybe she wasn't as perfect. And Byron was like, oh, so that makes you feel good? Like, so that's going to, you know, that's going to make you feel good and help justify the way you've lived your life. And he was like, look, I got to go. She said, where you got to go? He said, I have a work thing I have to take care of. She said, work, like, at a time like this, because it's already nighttime, you know, their mom's funeral. And he was like, listen, it's a work thing. I'm up for director, and I really can't afford to miss it. So we see him leave, and we see Benny. You know, she's upset. So Mr. Mitch goes to talk to her, and he was like, she couldn't find the tin milk, which we call evaporated milk. And he showed her where it was, and it wasn't up in the cabinet like it used to be. It was down in the drawer. And he told her, he said, well, you know, towards the end, your mom couldn't really maneuver like she used to, so I moved a lot of stuff around for her. And she just kind of looked at him, and she was like, you know, I can't imagine my mom needing to rely on anybody for anything. And he was like, well, you know, she did, and you know, I was glad to kind of be there for her. And she said, well, can I, you know, he said, well, do you want to ask me anything about your mom? Like, I can't play the tape, but do you want to hear anything? And he said, you know, your mom was very proud of you. And she was like, yeah, right. He said, no, she really was. She was very proud of you. He said she had me listening to your music on your YouTube channel. And she was like, YouTube, man, it's been so long since I posted anything. And he was like, you really should. You're very talented, and you shouldn't let that voice, you know, go to waste. And so they kind of bonded over that a little bit. And while this is going on, we see Byron is down at work, and come to find out, he didn't get the director's job. You know, it came down to him and, another white guy. And you could tell, of course, that upset him. You know, he definitely wasn't happy to hear it. And he's upset by it. I'm not sure what he's going to do about it. But, you know, he plays the part. He congratulates the other guy. And, you know, so he ends up going back to the house. Because Mr. Mitch left, and he told Benny, he said, listen, I'll be back whenever you're ready for me to come back, I'll come back. He said, day or night, whatever time. So when Byron comes back to the house, he says, look, I called Mr. Mitch. He's on his way back. I need to get this over with. Like, I really got other stuff I got to do. But we do see where they sort of bond a little bit. He was like, I need a drink. So they do end up having a drink together, and they end up taking a toast. So you see where they sort of bond a little bit or whatever. Also, we see where Benny, you know, is going through her mom's stuff and kind of reminiscing a little bit. And we hear her listening to a voicemail of her mother telling her to come home. So, of course, I'm sure she carries that guilt, and she's crying or what have you. So we get back into the story. We finally sit down, and they start playing the story again. And we pick up with Eleanor. So Benny is in London. All these names. Covey is in London. She now has to go by the name of Coventina Brown. She's picked up her mother's maiden name with forged documents. And she was, Pearl told her, you got to stay away from large crowds and you have to stay away from places where people might recognize you. And they had to lie about where she was from. So she said she was from the mountains, but child, she keep forgetting she from the mountains. Her first day of getting ready to go to work, because she's working as a nanny, and her roommate, Ellie, is in nursing school. And so the first day she's getting dressed and stuff, it is pouring down raining, and she goes to put her sneakers on, and Ellie is like, girl, where you going to them sneakers? Like, where are your rain slickers? And she said, you from the mountains? Like, where's all your rain gear? She said, oh man, I must have just left it. I must have been in such a rush. I left everything. She said, okay, well, girl, I'll help you, get to work. So she had, brushed her hair all straight, and, everything, her hair was looking all nice and everything. And baby, Ellie tried to tell her how to get to work. And of course she got lost, and she was 30 minutes late for work. Her hair was soaked and she was wet. And she shows up to this white woman's house to be the nanny. And of course she looks her over like, girl, you look like a soaking dog right now. She meets the kids that she's gonna be nannying for, and they have a maid who is Asian, and she kind of side eyes Benny a little bit. I think she sees some things, she sort of side eyes Benny a little bit. Damn, I keep saying Benny, Coventina, Covey. We see that she's lonely. We see her go into the water, and of course, the water in London ain't the same as the beaches of Jamaica. But we see her trying, go to the water and just sort of kind of get some solace from the water. We even see her go down to the university to look for Gibbs, but she walks away. She's a little afraid, like, I'm not, like, I can't take this chance. Like, I shouldn't take this chance. We see that the ladies at the boarding house, try to get her to come and hang out. They were like, look, we go down to the docks. Come down to the docks with us. And she was like, well, what's going on at the docks? And they said, well, a boat comes in every week, and, we go down there to see if we know anybody. If anybody's coming from our area, our town. They were like, you never know what you're going to get. It could be a long lost love, or it could be your worst enemy. And so Cubby's like, yeah, no, I've had a long day. Maybe next time. And I don't think that the what I like is that it didn't seem like the ladies thought that she was snooty or stuck up. They just thought like, okay, she's homesick. She ain't trying to hang out with us. So we see her thinking about what Bunny told her. Bunny told her, whenever you start feeling, you go to the water and you let yourself go. And so she decides that she's going to not let herself forget who she is and forget her culture. So she's at work and she's making fish soup. And the maid, the lady that's from Asia, was like, I think she's from China. She was like, girl, that is Chinese soup. Like, well, that is fish soup. That's a Chinese dish. Where you learn how to make that? And she was like, oh, well, my grandmother's neighbor was Chinese. And that lady looking at her like, yeah, all right. So she tries to feed the soup to the little churn she taking care of, and baby, they wasn't here for it. They said it was nasty, and they wanted fish and chips. And so that just totally threw her off. That night, she's crying, she's upset, and Ellie comes home, and Ellie's like, girl, what's wrong? And she said, look, I've just had a really bad day, and I don't really feel like talking. And so Ellie said, well, what if I told you I had a bad day, and I don't feel, and I'll tell you about my day. So the two of them really start bonding. She talks about missing home and going to the sea every day and being able to go swimming. And Ellie was like, your grandmother used to come down the mountain and take you to the beach every day? And she was like, yeah. And Benny was like, okay. Ellie was like, okay, girl. I don't know why I want to call everybody Benny, but she was like, okay, girl. And then Ellie let her know about her being an orphan. And she talked about, growing up in an orphanage and how she lost both of her parents early. She said she doesn't tell a lot of people because they feel sorry for her. And she was like, I don't really want anybody's pity. So then she shows them she shows Covey her shells that she found digging in the backyard of the orphanage. And she said, we were up in the mountains. I don't know how in the world we got shells. And Ellie explains to Covey how, thousands of years ago, there was a great storm and Jamaica was actually underwater, so there's shells all over the island. And then it sort of emerged, and Cubby was like, girl, why are you studying nursing? Why aren't you studying geology? Like, your whole face lit up when you were talking about, talking about the history, of the land of the island. And she was like, because there was a nursing program looking for island girls, and it was my way out. And she said, well, why don't you go study? She said, I found out there was a program at Edinburgh, but it was too late. I was already here. And she was like, well, it's never too late to pursue your dreams. And she was like, girl, she said, and are your dreams to be a nanny? And she said, no, I wanted to be a swimmer, but, things didn't quite work out. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to land, but it didn't really work out for me too well. So Ellie graduates from nursing school, so they have a party for her, and we see Cubby making her a black cake, right? She said she makes the black cake for her. We see her going through all the different ingredients and everything to make the cake. And there's a party that night, and one of the girls, I forget her name, but anyway, one of the girls introduced Cubby to a guy from the town near where she said she was from. So of course he's asking her, well, what high school did you go to? My mom was a teacher. Did you know her? Well, my aunt, taught there. And then she said some school she said she went to. He said, oh, I didn't know that was co-ed. She said, oh, it is now. Like, so she realizes, like, and she walks away from him. And the girl was like, what are you doing? You lying? And she was like, what? She said, because she told him she needed to go get a drink. She said, you don't drink. So she said, are you that nervous talking to boys? And Cubby was like, yeah, I'm that nervous. And she says, well, okay, well, if he's not, your type, and that's what she said. She said, well, he's not really my type either. She said, okay, fine. Well, he's not your type. If he's not your type, no problem. He said that on the boat next week, it's a bunch of people from his hometown. So, you might meet somebody else that or that, is more familiar with you or whatever, that's from your area, and so Cubby realizes, she said, the walls are closing in. Like, it's really only a matter of time before I get busted or I get tripped up in my own lie, and I really need to make a move. So later on that night, she talks to Ellie about going to Edinburgh. And Ellie was like, girl, I got a job starting, because this is around the holidays. She said, I have a job starting at the first of the year. Like, I just finished nursing school. Like, why would I leave all of that? And she said, because you really need to pursue your dreams. She said, and I would go with you. She said, you would quit your job and go with me to Edinburgh? Like, she said, yeah. She said, I can find a job, and I really feel like you need to pursue your dreams. So she convinces Ellie that it's a good idea for them to go down to Edinburgh. So we see them on the train, and they're having tea, and Cubby actually opens up to Ellie a little bit more, and she lets her know, look, girl, I ain't really from the islands, child. I'm from the beach. And Ellie was like, well, that explains the fact that you didn't have any rain gear. Okay. She said, yeah. She said, she doesn't tell the whole story. And Ellie tells her, she said, listen, you ain't got to tell me the whole story. Like, when you're ready to tell me, that's fine. If you never tell me, that's fine too. So they do a little toast to, to a new beginning and everything. And next thing you know, there's this huge accident. The train derails. There's a huge train accident. And we see Ellie land on the ground. We see Cubby land on the ground. We don't see Ellie at first. And her leg is really, really badly injured. And she said, as I was laying there waiting to die, I thought about my pa and what might be going on back at home. So then we go back to the island, and we see that we're actually at the funeral service for Cubby. They think that she died in the train derailment. So we see Bunny, we see Pearl, we see her dad, we see Lil Man's brothers still lurking, and we see the police still lurking. So, they say, hey, the pastor is doing his service, and he said, we've lost two people in our community within the last year. He talking about Clarence and now, Coven Tina. And so Bunny is really struggling. We see Pearl try to talk to Bunny, and Buddy don't want to talk to Pearl. Then we see her dad trying to talk to her, and she don't want to talk to him either. And we see her running off, and we see her running to the water. And we see Lynn, Covey's dad, coming out to church, and we see the police there. And he was like, listen, you've been following me around for the last, for these last couple of months. Now you can rest assured that, like, my daughter's gone. If she was your number one suspect, she's dead now. So you can leave me alone. And the police was like, oh no, she wasn't our only suspect. She was just the number one suspect. Trust and believe, there are other people we're looking at. And so Lynn was like, really? Me? Like, you think I did it? And he was like, you're not my only suspect either. But just know that this investigation is not over. So then, of course, Lil Man's brothers come out. They giving Lynn the side eye because, again, even they feel like even if, because what they told him was, and the police what the police said was, even if she didn't do it, she was found living in London under her mother's maiden name, which means it was a coincidence, somebody helped her get off the island. So even if she didn't do it, the person who did it helped her. And he said, and we got our suspicions. So Lynn tries to talk to Bunny's dad. And he was like, you ain't been around in a while. And he said, listen, Bunny's been really struggling. I really been dealing with her. And he was like, yeah, well, I could really use a friend too. He said, listen, bruh, you made your bed and you have to lie in it. He said, people have been talking about how close Covey and Bunny were. And I got to protect my daughter. He said, you put us all at risk when you decided to marry her off to Lil Man. Now, I'm going to go back a step further. I feel like you put them all at risk when you got in business with Lil Man. But whatever, because the marriage was the byproduct of you not being able to pay back your loan. But okay, neither here nor there. So we see Bunny's dad chasing after Bunny. And he says, listen, you got to talk to me. What's going on? And she says, I haven't been able to swim since she left. He was like, well, what can I do to help? And she said, I don't know, because she used to inspire me. She used to push me. Like, she made me better. And I don't know how to do it without her. And he said, listen, you remember, the coach that used to be here? Well, he's been asking about you. And, I think you could work with him. I think he could help you. And she was like, are you setting me up on a date? Or are you trying to find me a coach to help me train? And her father was like, girl, think about it. So I don't know if it's supposed to be like a little bit of both, but he was like, girl, think about it. So that's kind of where we left that. So then we see Lynn at his store, and Lil Man's brothers come in there, and they're like, yeah, what's going on here? He said business is going to pick up. Don't worry about it. And he said, well, I tell you what. I said, don't worry about it. We're not going to let you run my brother's store into the ground. We're taking over. You can go. And he was like, no, this is my family's store. They were like, not anymore. It belongs to us. And they beat him up and they kick him out. So we see Lynn go back to the beginning when he was a kid, when his parents first had the store. And we see that they've been dealing with racism. Well, I don't know if the word is racism. Prejudice, maybe. Even from the time Lynn was a kid, we see somebody throwing a brick through their door telling them to go home. They don't need no people there. I'm not going to say the names, but racial slurs as it relates to people of Chinese descent. So his mother sends him to the store to go get a fish head so she can make some fish stew. And on his way there, he finds the cockfights. He wins, and he's able to buy more than just a fish head for his family and bring money home. And he's rewarded. His mother's happy to see it. His mother's like, yes, you're my little prince. You always going to, take care of the family. So he connected the cockfights with rewards. And we see over the years where he was successful winning the cockfight. So that was his thing. He won. He did really good. He made good money. And then we see that Covey's mom came into the store one day, And that's how the two of them met. She didn't have enough money to pay for what she needed, and her family member was sick and she needed the ingredients. So he gave her a discount. She was like, don't pity me. He was like, I'm not pitying you. You just happen to come in here on the right day. Everything's half off. So, So that's how they started dating. And so we see the love story there. But then we see where over the years his luck ran out and he wasn't winning like he used to. And then we see him drinking more, which led us to where we picked up at the beginning of the show last episode, where he had a drinking problem and his luck was bad as it related to the cockfights. We see where little man, they show us a scene where little man first approaches him about Covey, and he was like, yo, she only 15 years old. Like, no. And little man, who, like I said, looked like he was all of 50 years old, talking about that's the right age for a little girl. And he was like, nah, you don't want her. She got a smart mouth. He was like, oh, really? She got a smart mouth. I said, see, he already letting you know he gonna whoop your daughter's tail. So, and then we pick up at the wedding, where the father really realizes exactly what he did. Like, oh my gosh, I really did sell my daughter. And he was like, we see him running into like a closet, and Pearl goes after him. Pearl was like, I thought this was you. He was like, Pearl, what are we gonna do? He was like, we got to get her out of this. She was like, now you want to come up with a plan? Like, it's over now. We at the reception. The wedding happened. Like, now you want me to come up with something? He was like, well, we got to figure something out. She said, listen, all you need to do is get yourself together and carry your tail out here before people start questioning where are you and what you doing. And you just got to you got to put up a front. Like, it's too late. Like, it is what it is now. So they go back out into the wedding, and the father thinks he sees Gibbs. He was like, wait a minute. Gibbs, that's that Gibbs boy. And Pearl was like, child, she was like, you drunk, because Gibbs been gone. Like, he has been gone to London for months now. Like, that's not him. And just as he's like staring out the window to make sure he saw Gibbs, that's when Clarence collapses and dies, and we know what happens then. So the next thing you know, we see Lem walking into the ocean, honey, trying to unalive himself. Then we flash back to the train with Covey lying on the ground. She finally sees Ellie, and she tries to crawl over to Ellie. Next thing you know, she wakes up in a hospital room where people call her Ellie. And she was like, Covey. She was like, oh, Coventina Brown, that was your friend? And she's like, what you mean that was your friend? She was like, Ellie. And the nurse was like, oh, is that what you prefer us call you instead of Eleanor? You want to be called Ellie? She was like, no. The nurse was like, okay, girl. Well, this is where she becomes Eleanor, because they think that she's Eleanor, and they think Covey is who died, which is how the news got back to the island that Coventina Brown died in the train accident. So that is where we end episode 2, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.